Our boy drifts back to consciousness. His first sight is a strange white square, part of a bizarre floating structure. He finds himself sitting in a vast, empty space. A flicker of recognition crosses his face. He questions his surroundings, feeling the sand beneath him, because just a moment ago he was somewhere else entirely. His eyes widen in pure, unadulterated shock. He's in a massive coliseum announced as Yoshizawa Hitomu, and the roaring crowd is, well, not his usual fan club. The stands are filled with monstrous spectators. A sea of masked figures watches on. He turns, his confusion growing. He can't make sense of any of it. Then, a single white cube detaches itself and drifts slowly toward him. He recognizes the design from some old video game. Great, he's in a retro nightmare. He reaches out, questioning what it is. His curiosity gets the better of him, and it immediately detonates in his face. The explosion rips through Yoshizawa's body. A brutal instant attack from the floating cubes. He can't even process the searing pain. As the announcer declares his defeat, but in the next instant, he's perfectly fine. Not a scratch on him back where he started. A new match is announced, and a new opponent appears. This time, a hulking brute with a massive club. Our boy's luck just isn't getting any better. The weapon comes crashing down, ending the match instantly. And just like that, he's back, as the third match is announced. Another instant, brutal defeat is declared. He respawns to face a one-eyed mushroom monster, which promptly ends the match with some kind of toxic attack. The cycle repeats over and over again. He's defeated by opponent after opponent, unable to understand why. His mind flashes back to his normal, mundane life, to the soul-crushing exhaustion of his daily routine. He remembers standing alone in front of a vending machine, and the moment he decided to quit smoking. He remembers his vow to quit smoking. Leaving the office after another long day, facing the quiet judgment of passers-by, his only relief came from a bag of cheap comforts. He'd try to find a moment of peace, but his body was already protesting. He sat alone, utterly drained by the routine, wishing for an escape from his responsibilities. His thoughts turned to more creative solutions. Because a terrorist attack is a small price to pay for a day off, apparently. The flashback continues with Yoshizawa on the bench, plotting. He remembers realizing the security guard was making his rounds, when suddenly, a brilliant flash of light erupted before him. He saw it not as a threat, but as a twisted opportunity. A chance to get injured, be praised, and finally get a day off. But a powerful voice cut through his thoughts. A shadowy figure declared him the perfect candidate. Majestic wings spread wide as it commanded him to fight. This cosmic being has summoned him for a tournament to find the weakest character in the universe. Finally, a competition he might actually win. Which brings us back to the present, and match number 218. His new opponent, a small hooded figure, seems to understand. They realize they've been forced into this brutal cycle. A cycle Yoshizawa still can't comprehend. The hooded fighter raises their weapon with grim determination, unwilling to suffer the same fate as the others, and brings their staff down hard on Yoshizawa. He hits the ground, utterly powerless once again, trapped by the fear of fighting and the fear of not, a fear that consumes him from every possible angle, as the announcer's voice confirms another loss for Yoshizawa, as Yoshizawa lies defeated once more. The announcer's voice booms through the Coliseum. The preliminary round-robin matches are officially over. And now it's time to introduce the 5 finalists, a truly pathetic lineup of losers from across dimensions. Yoshizawa realizes he's not alone in his failure. The announcer declares the final match is about to begin, a battle to determine the weakest being in all of existence. The winner of this tournament, so to speak, will be decided in a 5-way battle royale. The rules are simple, the last one standing wins. The monstrous crowd roars in anticipation, eager to see who will be crowned the most pathetic. Yoshizawa is stunned by the sheer humiliation of it all. He collapses to his knees, utterly lost and defeated. But then a sudden realization hits him. The crowd, ever the supportive bunch, begins to taunt him. The announcer notes that none of the finalists are moving, but Yoshizawa's eyes are fixed on a faint line in the sand. He feels a subtle shift in the air, a gentle breeze. He looks around, a new thought taking hold. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as it clicks. That line in the sand wasn't just a line. The entire arena is a fabrication. He sees it all now. The seams, the joints, the mechanisms holding this stage together. He may not have the courage to fight, but he's always been a master of running away from his job, from his responsibilities, and from every hardship life threw at him. His resume of running away is apparently top tier, and this tournament is the job offer. He realizes he wasn't chosen to fight. He was chosen to run, and if running is the challenge, he'll gladly accept. The announcer cries out as Yoshizawa makes a break for it. The other finalists are left completely bewildered. Apparently, Flea on Sight wasn't in the pre-match briefing. He sprints toward the edge of the fabricated arena. His hands frantically search the wall's surface. He finds it, a hidden panel, a possible way out. He glances back at his competition with a smug grin. He offers them a chance to join his great escape, but the other finalists can only stare in disbelief. He tells them that if they're all the same, then this is their only way out. He pulls the handle with everything he has, and the entire arena floor gives way beneath them all. So much for a clean getaway. He realizes his mistake a little too late. As they all plummet into the darkness below, the crowd roars, watching their descent from above. The crowd murmurs, confused by the sudden turn of events. High above, a horned official is absolutely furious. He laments this unprecedented failure during their sacred tournament. Meanwhile, in a control room, two figures discuss the chaos. One panics about the angry audience and their duty as hosts, but the other, a blindfolded man, seems completely unfazed. He simply states they have no choice but to see this through. His voice echoes through the arena, asking everyone to remain calm. He assures them this is all just a special, unplanned performance. Far below, the 5 finalists lie scattered across a forest floor. Yoshizawa groans, slowly coming to his senses. Up above, the announcer declares a new game has begun. A hunt, where the 5 finalists are the prey. The announcer introduces the first, a robot from a space opera. Next, a mascot monster named Gachin, followed by our very own Yoshizawa Hitomu, a slime from a world of swords and magic, and a terrified-looking tofu yokai. A screen shows them scattered across the forest floor. And their hunters? The thousands of other contestants. So much for a fair fight. The announcer reveals the hunt will take place across a variety of deadly simulated environments. Back in the control room, the horned official explains his impromptu plan. The blindfolded man remarks on his colleague's bold thinking and seems to quietly approve of the new direction. Meanwhile, Yoshizawa slowly regains consciousness on the forest floor. He jolts upright, shocked to find himself still in one piece. He looks up at a strange sky, wondering where he even is. Guess gravity is just a suggestion here. And then he remembers the other 4 finalists. But he's completely alone in the dense woods. He wonders if the others were scattered by the fall. Then he spots something lying in the grass. It's the hat belonging to the terrified tofu yokai, proof that at least one of them landed nearby. Which can only mean one thing: he's been abandoned. His mind races with paranoia and self-doubt. He collapses, overwhelmed by the thought of teamwork. Social anxiety is a killer, even in interdimensional death games. But as he wallows in his own misery, he notices something. A familiar gelatinous blob jiggles in the clearing. It's the slime, looking about as threatening as a puddle. The slime quivers, a single eye staring blankly. Yoshizawa's relief is palpable. He realizes the slime waited for him. He awkwardly tries to start a conversation and asks the gelatinous creature for a plan. The slime offers only a silent vibration in response. His anxiety spikes as he warns that staying here is dangerous. He tries to explain that danger means they need to get away from it. Logic 101 for interdimensional blobs. His frustration boils over, questioning its complete lack of movement. He declares that he's leaving and asks what it plans to do. And with that, the slime simply bounces off without him. Yoshizawa is left standing alone in the dense forest. He immediately regrets trying to have a polite conversation with a blob of jelly, a blob that was just bouncing around in circles anyway. He wonders how it could be so fearless, like a low-level mob in a video game. He pushes onward, finding nothing but more trees and silence. Utterly drained, he takes a seat on a fallen log. He laments being stuck in a jungle wearing dress shoes. Survival 101, this is not. He reaches into his jacket, searching for an old, familiar vice. So much for his vow to quit smoking. His mind floods with anxiety, the stress of the hunt overwhelming him completely. His imagination runs wild with visions of the hunters. He's completely frozen, a prisoner of his own fear. He hesitates, realizing the risk of lighting up is too high. With a sigh, he puts his only comfort away. Suddenly, a slimy sensation touches his back. He whips around, startled by the contact. It's the slime, having quietly returned for him. It bounces past, heading deeper into the woods. Yoshizawa stands utterly baffled by its return. He asks if it was just bouncing in circles this whole time. The slime offers him a small gelatinous piece of itself. It seems to explain that it fell from his pocket during the fall. It even appears to apologize, blaming itself for them getting caught. But Yoshizawa realizes the slime isn't feeling guilt or joy. It was just trembling, the same way it did back in the arena. It's not brave or foolish, it's just reacting, a simple creature. Just then, a rustle in the bushes sends him scrambling back in terror. But what emerges is a giant stuffed pig in overalls. This death game has a weird budget. Yoshizawa and the slime can only stare, completely baffled. The pig politely introduces itself, and Yoshizawa, ever the salaryman, returns the courtesy. The pig asks if Yoshizawa is a native of this strange forest. It then clarifies that its own home is actually nearby. It explains it was summoned by a god to participate in the tournament. Yoshizawa grabs the creature, stunned to learn it was also a contestant. He can't believe something so innocent was thrown into this death game. The pig simply confirms its participation with a nod. Yoshizawa kneels, offering a moment of sympathy for its terrifying experience. But the pig's face contorts, denying it was ever scared at all. Looks like his empathy was a bit misplaced. He looks up, a cold dread washing over him, as a massive blade swings down, revealing the pig was never prey. The pig proudly explains it was just following orders from its god, and in a flash its arm transforms into a weapon, slicing through Yoshizawa's shoulder in a brutal strike. Even the slime can only watch in silent horror. Yoshizawa collapses, clutching his wound as the pig curiously observes the aftermath. Through the pain, he asks if it's responsible for the other finalists' fates. But the pig seems genuinely confused by the question. Yoshizawa can't believe it doesn't understand the consequences of its actions. The pig explains that its father uses a knife just like this one, because its father is a chef. Apparently, culinary school has some very aggressive new programs. The pig explains that it's not dangerous, because its god told it that Yoshizawa was a kind person and that it must always return kindness to others. A flashback reveals the pig's home, a peaceful, cartoonish world. But this creature feels no fear, no hesitation, and certainly no malice as it swings its blade. Yoshizawa barely dodges the relentless assault. He grabs the pig, who screams that it just wants to go home. Its god told it to finish the job quickly out here. Apparently, divine beings are big on efficiency. And with a blank expression, it swings its blade once more. The blade slices cleanly through his arm. The pig gets a face full of the messy results. Yoshizawa collapses, crying out from the searing pain. He realizes that outside the arena, there are no respawns. The pig wails, suddenly understanding that death here is permanent. A bit late for that epiphany, pal. The thought of a true end paralyzes him. He grabs the fallen knife, his expression hardening. He tells the pig that it may not understand, but he absolutely refuses to die here. And in a desperate act, he holds the blade to his own neck. He stares back, tears of desperation in his eyes. But the blade falls from his hand. Instead, he scoops up the trembling slime and tells the pig that they both need to run. He turns and walks away, leaving a grim trail behind him. He knows this is a bad idea, that running like this is probably useless, and his body quickly gives out from the blood loss. He looks back, a new wave of fear washing over him, because he's just realized they're being watched. He curses his own weakness, his pathetic attempt to flee. But in that despair, a desperate thought takes hold. The pig just wants this to be over so it can go home. Yoshizawa knows he's powerless to stop it, so he suddenly points behind the creature, shouting a warning. And in that moment of distraction, he grabs the slime. He hurls it to safety, a noble sacrifice for a gelatinous blob. He tells the pig he can't bring himself to fight it, and is stunned by his own unexpected act of courage. As the pig advances, he decides he has time for one last smoke. He reflects on the irony of buying 2 packs. While the pig dismisses his petty concerns, he flicks his lighter, a small smile on his face. The massive blade comes swinging down, as he takes one final satisfying drag, but the weapon stops just inches from his neck. He looks on, completely bewildered by this sudden pause. The pig is suddenly overcome with a strange fury, as a shadowy figure appears from nowhere, and the creature collapses, writhing in agony. Looks like the hunt has a new hunter. The pig is sent flying into the chasm below. Yoshizawa peers over the edge, watching it disappear. He looks down at the cigarette in his hand, and remembers a strange vision of a creature in the sky. A sudden manic laugh escapes his lips. He remembers just how much he hates this habit. He recalls the judgment from strangers on the street, and the shame of being unable to quit, the feeling of being mocked just for being himself. But now, a desperate resolve hardens his expression. He collapses to the ground, screaming that this is why he survived. And from the trees, the slime watches on silently. He flicks his lighter, the small flame bringing a new thought. His mind flashes back to his boss's furious reprimands, to the crushing apathy of his old, miserable life. He remembers setting something on fire, and watching the flames grow with a strange sense of calm. Back in the present, he asks his gelatinous friend if it's warm. The slime seems to agree, jiggling beside him. He gently touches it, noticing his own blood on its surface. The slime reacts to his touch, forming a small gelatinous hand. Yoshizawa quickly apologizes for getting blood on it, but the creature begins to bubble and shift violently, morphing into something entirely new before his eyes. The gelatinous blob reshapes itself into a young woman. Well, that's one way to make a new friend. Yoshizawa can only stare, completely speechless at the transformation. He hears a faint sound, a familiar name on the wind. The woman looks at him, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. His mind flashes back to a girl from his past, and the slime woman leans in close, her intentions unclear. She presses closer, her gelatinous form still shifting. Yoshizawa can only stammer, completely lost. Her hand moves toward his pocket, and he sees the slime's familiar core within her. She opens her mouth as if trying to communicate. Then she embraces him, pressing against his chest. His mind races with panic, trying to understand her actions. His social anxiety was not prepared for this level of interaction. A jolt of shock runs through him. Something is being drawn from his body into hers. She pulls back, surprised to find his blood on her face. She tastes the blood from his wound, and a horrifying thought dawns on Yoshizawa. He's about to be eaten by his only ally. Meanwhile, back in the broadcasting booth, the pig has returned after failing its hunt. The announcer asks for its thoughts on the performance. The crowd erupts in laughter at its failure. The announcer praises the pig's pathetic display. Guess there are no participation trophies here. And then, the pig's god makes an appearance. He seems quite pleased with the entertainment his champion provided. The god reflects on the pig's failure, but praises it for racking up so many loser points. The pig, however, just wants to go home, but its god insists it must be even more pathetic to win. The creature innocently asks what winning even means. The god reveals the prize is nothing more than a laugh. The pig questions why it must suffer for their amusement. Divine beings have a very dark sense of humor, a question that seems to deeply offend its master, who roars that a mortal should never question its god. And with a single, brutal motion, he silences his champion forever. The god's brutal act sends a shockwave through the arena. Even the other contestants can only watch in horror. A message is broadcast to all the hunters. Find the finalists or else... Meanwhile, back in the forest, a new light breaks through the canopy. Yoshizawa slowly drifts back to consciousness. He sits up with a start, feeling strangely different. He looks down at his arm, his eyes widening in disbelief. The wound from the pig's attack is completely gone. He scrambles back as the slime woman looks on with a cheerful expression. Guess eating him was just her version of first aid. He wonders if she somehow used her body to heal him. She looks at him with a gentle, curious expression. She seems to suggest that it's time for them to leave. Yoshizawa stands beside her, still trying to process everything. He awkwardly realizes he doesn't even know her name. He turns away, wondering what he should even call her. He decides to call her Saiaka, after the girl from his past. A memory of the original Saiaka flashes in his mind. The slime woman seems to approve of her new name, but he's suddenly struck by the realization of her current state. His brain completely short-circuits, overwhelmed by the situation. He peeks at her, his mind lost in old memories. He notices a strange light emanating from her, a convenient glare obscuring the view. His brain compares this to some late-night anime trope, and then his pants spontaneously combust. He realizes her body is acting like a magnifying glass, focusing the sun's rays directly onto him. With no other choice, he makes a desperate leap and plunges into the water below. He surfaces, having found the tofu yokai's lost hat. He places the hat on her head, telling her to be careful with the sun. Saiaka seems to understand, offering a gentle smile. And so they continue on, a truly bizarre pair. Soon they spot a lone figure sitting in the distance. It's the robot, one of the other finalists waiting for them. The robot seems just as surprised to see them approach. Yoshizawa recognizes it from the battle royale. It corrects him, stating its name is Kei. Relieved, Yoshizawa asks if it will join their escape. But Kei calls him a fool and sends him flying. So much for teamwork. Kei declares that if they won't run, then they must fight. A concept that leaves Yoshizawa completely bewildered. The robot launches into a passionate speech about the nature of survival. It insists they must stand their ground until the hunters arrive. Kei grabs Yoshizawa, demanding a response to its lecture. It orders him to make eye contact when being spoken to. The demand triggers a memory of his old boss's furious reprimands. Looks like corporate trauma follows you across dimensions. He realizes Kei is the exact type of person he can't stand. The robot continues its tirade, asking if he's even listening. It demands he look up and face it. Yoshizawa looks up, still reeling from the robot's lecture. Kei continues to berate him for his lack of fighting spirit. It insists that his silence is the same as ignoring its words. The robot demands that he speak his mind, whatever it is. Yoshizawa finally points out that Kei didn't win a single match either. The robot dismisses this as if it's completely irrelevant. Yoshizawa is left speechless by its nonchalant attitude. Kei proudly declares that as a combat robot, fighting is its entire identity. A fact Yoshizawa finds hard to believe, given its less than threatening design. But Kei confirms its purpose with absolute certainty. The three of them look up, confused by a sudden noise. Just as a massive explosion rips through the nearby terrain, the blast sends Yoshizawa and Saiaka to the ground in shock. But Yoshizawa recognizes that sound from somewhere. He looks up to see a silhouette cresting the cliff. It's a tank, a surprisingly small, almost cute one. He realizes it's a model from his childhood. A wave of relief washes over him. Guess the hunters aren't all terrifying, but Kei steps forward, declaring that it's his time to shine. The robot's chassis opens up, revealing its true combat form. Yoshizawa can only stare as Kei's body glows with power. The sheer force of the blast sends them stumbling backward. He tries to reason with the robot, insisting it's not a combat model, but Kei declares this is the perfect opponent to test its might. Yoshizawa screams that the tank is a real military-grade weapon. He insists that they are completely outmatched. But Kei simply states that fighting is its entire purpose. The robot lets out a triumphant laugh, ready for battle. It begins a rapid-fire analysis of the tank's weak points. Apparently, it's seen this model before. Yoshizawa can only listen, realizing Kei is not just weird, but completely unhinged. He wonders if Kei is just pretending to be a seasoned veteran. But a glance at Saiaka triggers a familiar memory, a flashback to a girl he once knew, long ago. He turns back to Kei, a chilling realization dawning on him. The robot continues its analysis of the enemy tank. It seems to recognize this kind of battlefield. Yoshizawa realizes with horror that this isn't Kei's first fight. He grabs the robot, trying to stop its suicidal charge. Kei seems genuinely confused by his interference. It declares that this is exactly what it was built for. Apparently, the warranty doesn't cover common sense. He realizes Kei is some kind of child soldier. Kei admits it was too scared to fight in the arena. But after calming down, it realized it wouldn't die here. It saw the tank as a chance to finally prove itself. But Yoshizawa looks over at Saiaka, and her expression is one of deep sadness. It reminds him of the original Sayaka's tears. Just as the tank's hatch pops open, the tank loads a shell ready to fire. Kei screams that it was born for this, completely oblivious to the loaded cannon. He explains that out here death is permanent. The robot freezes, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. It begins to tremble uncontrollably. Just as the tank opens fire, Yoshizawa screams at them to run, but Kei is completely paralyzed by fear. Guess the warranty didn't cover existential dread. He grabs the robot and they make a break for it. The tank watches them from the cliff top. Its massive cannon slowly takes aim. Yoshizawa looks back, knowing what's coming next. But the tank suddenly stops, as if confused. It begins a slow, clumsy turn, leaving a wide set of tracks in the dirt. It seems turning on a dime wasn't in the budget, and Yoshizawa realizes its critical weakness. He leads them down a narrow canyon path, confident they can finally lose their pursuer. But the tank simply takes aim and fires. The shell explodes just inches from where they were. He realizes the tank likely only has one type of weapon. He realizes that among all military weapons, this tank is the weakest. But weak or not, a direct hit still means instant annihilation. The three of them finally stop to rest on a high, narrow ledge. Yoshizawa catches his breath, hoping they've finally lost it. Kei sits quietly, still processing its near-death experience. Yoshizawa looks over at the dejected robot. Kei turns, sensing his gaze. He awkwardly tries to make conversation, asking about Kei's home. The robot describes a futuristic world caught in an endless war. A war so intense, even home appliance makers were forced to produce weapons. Yoshizawa struggles to process this new information. Kei explains that in its world, humans are the ones who fight. He argues that Kei can't be a real combat robot then, but Kei proudly declares its AI is programmed to never lose power. Guess battery life is the true mark of a warrior. The grim reality of Kei's world begins to sink in for Yoshizawa. The robot leans closer, asking what's wrong. Yoshizawa's eyes are fixed on a familiar-looking part on Kei's chest. A memory clicks into place. Saiaka looks on, confused by his sudden silence. As Yoshizawa stares down at the robot, a horrifying realization dawns on him. They've found a temporary refuge on the high cliffs, but their pursuer simply looks up from below. Yoshizawa realizes their critical error in judgment. Their brilliant escape plan has led them to a dead end. The tank grinds into position, taking careful aim. They're completely exposed, with nowhere left to run. He knows that even a near miss could be fatal. The cannon begins to glow with a terrifying energy. He braces for the impact, his face a mask of fear, and the cliff face above them erupts in a shower of rock. Yoshizawa scrambles for cover as the cliffside shatters. His eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror. Kei clings to the rock, its own programming failing it. He tells the robot that it was never built for combat. But Kei refuses to believe it, insisting it's different. The tank below reloads, apparently tired of their existential crisis. Yoshizawa realizes if Kei is modeled on a human from his time, the tank below can only grow more confused and angry. He looks over at Saiaka, her expression filled with sorrow, and he's reminded of another girl's tears from a lifetime ago. He grabs Kei, trying to snap it out of its delusion, but screaming that its pride is a terrible mistake. Kei looks down, finally questioning its own purpose. But their time for self-reflection has just run out. The tank fires, blasting the cliffside below them. The shockwave rips through the air, sending dust and rock everywhere. A plume of smoke billows up from the canyon floor. The tank gives itself a little pat on the back for a job well done. It turns, grinding its treads into the rock as it repositions. The tank rolls away, its job seemingly complete. But far below, amidst the smoke and falling rock, the three finalists plummet into the abyss. They've formed a desperate chain, with Kei at the top, clinging to a large hammer embedded in the cliff face. Yoshizawa holds on, his grip straining under their combined weight. He looks up at Kei, whose arm is locked in place. The robot's hand is clamped onto the hammer with incredible force, and Yoshizawa finally understands. Kei's power isn't for combat, it's suction. It's a cleaning robot. As he processes this revelation, Saiaka reaches up to comfort him. Saiaka looks up at him, her expression unreadable. Yoshizawa can only stammer, his mind still reeling from the revelation. He looks up at Kei, whose arm is locked in place, holding them all from a fatal drop. And just like that, they're on solid ground again, in a completely different forest. They're met by a woman in a kimono and Gochin, the mascot monster. Yoshizawa points, recognizing another finalist from the tournament. Looks like the gang's all here, but their reunion is cut short as Gochin is struck by a flying object. A branch whips past them, thrown with surprising force, leaving everyone completely and utterly confused. Yoshizawa asks if the mascot monster fainted out of fear. The woman denies being scared, despite the obvious evidence. He's baffled by her strange, almost robotic denial. The tofu yokai stares back, her expression frozen in alarm. He turns to his own companions, ready to make introductions. Saiaka tilts her head, still a picture of gelatinous confusion. He tries to explain that Saiaka is the slime from the arena. Now that they're reunited, he suggests they all escape together. But they're standing in a vast freezing mountain range. Yoshizawa shivers, realizing the sun offers no warmth here. Yoshizawa struggles under the weight of the unconscious mascot. He turns to Kei, desperately asking for a hand. But Kei politely declines, reminding him it's just a weak cleaning robot. Instead, it offers to vacuum the dust from their feet. For morale. Yoshizawa can only stare as the robot vacuums the snow. His hand clenches, his patience wearing dangerously thin. He turns to Saiaka, telling her not to worry about it. She points out that he's not carrying anything heavy, and then she begins to absorb the mascot into her own body. Her expression remains placid as she consumes their fallen comrade. The tofu yokai stares in utter shock at Sayaka's form. Yoshizawa asks her to help carry the unconscious mascot. She stammers, completely bewildered by the request. He insists, but she flatly refuses to help him. Her excuse is that she's holding a plate of tofu. A very, very important plate of tofu, apparently. He offers to trade burdens, but she still says no. She explains that her task requires both hands at all times. Yoshizawa looks up, a sudden realization on his face. He glances over at Saiaka, who is using the hat as a bowl. He accuses the yokai of staring, a claim she quickly denies. An awkward silence falls over the group. He calls her out for staring, a fact she immediately denies. With a strained smile, he asks if she understands the gravity of their situation. The tofu yokai seems completely unfazed by his plea. Sayaka then chimes in, claiming the hat as her own. Yoshizawa quickly clarifies that he was just borrowing it. He explains to the yokai that Sayaka needs the hat to keep from focusing sunlight. The yokai offers a simple solution, just put on some clothes. She then offers to trade her precious plate for the hat. Yoshizawa looks from the mascot to the yokai, a new idea taking shape. He explains that if she helps carry the mascot, Gochin suddenly stirs, looking just as confused as he is. Just as a massive tree trunk slams into the snow beside them, the impact sends a shockwave through the group, and the tofu yokai's precious cargo splatters all over Yoshizawa. He stands there, drenched and defeated, still holding the mascot. The tofu yokai can only lament her terrible loss. Priorities, I guess. The entire group collapses, their morale completely shattered. Yoshizawa lies in the snow, the cigarette falling from his lips. But a sudden jolt snaps him back to reality. Kei politely thanks him for his hard work, ever the diligent appliance. The whole group lies defeated, a pathetic tableau in the snow. But from the drifts, a ghostly hunter emerges. It stalks them, ready to claim its prize. The announcer introduces the creature as it prepares to attack. It lunges forward with surprising speed, and is immediately caught by Kei's vacuum attachment. The hunter is unceremoniously sucked into the machine. So much for a dramatic entrance. Kei looks on, confused, as its own equipment shatters from the strain, and the monstrous crowd erupts in hysterical laughter. Yoshizawa lies in the snow, completely checked out. The tofu yokai asks Saiaka if she can have her hat back now, but Yoshizawa cuts in with a firm no. The yokai is left completely stunned by his response. He mutters about her ridiculous priorities in this life-or-death game. Saiaka seems to try and interject, but Yoshizawa finally snaps, screaming at the yokai to get a grip. His sudden outburst leaves her completely terrified. She quickly tries to deny ever asking for the hat back. Yoshizawa lets out a sigh, utterly defeated by his own team. Yoshizawa's eyes reflect his utter exhaustion. Kei, meanwhile, is diligently cleaning the forest floor. Saiaka sits patiently, holding the hat over her head, and Gochin the mascot is still completely unconscious. The tofu yokai sits alone, her spirit completely broken. Yoshizawa realizes he's surrounded by a team of failures, and he knows he's just as pathetic as the rest of them. He grabs his head, screaming internally at his own weakness. The thought of being chosen for this is too much to bear. But then, a single tear marks a sudden shift in his resolve. He wipes his face, realizing his tears are freezing on his skin. He looks up at the sun, a pale, distant orb in the sky, but it offers no warmth, and the cold seeps deeper into his bones. He looks over at his companions, all equally defeated. He tries to push himself up, but his legs have no strength left. Saiaka shivers, her gelatinous form struggling against the cold. She reaches out a hand to help him, which promptly morphs into a ridiculously muscular arm. Guess she's been working out. The tofu yokai is so startled she drops her precious plate. Yoshizawa can only watch, completely baffled by this new development. Yoshizawa realizes the cold isn't just from the snow. It's because Kei is working overtime, completely oblivious. Back in the arena, the announcers are just as baffled by the scene. A commentator is asked to explain this bizarre turn of events. He reveals the ghost's ability to drain the stamina of anyone it touches, but Kei's vacuum forced the creature to maintain constant contact, draining the robot's water-based power source at an alarming rate. So Kei began absorbing all the moisture from the air to compensate, a process that's now rapidly freezing everyone else in the vicinity. So much for being a helpful appliance. The commentators note the terrible irony of their matchup. A commentator notes that if they all freeze, it's unclear who gets the loser points, a problem that even the organizers are struggling with. The blindfolded man watches on, his expression unreadable. Down below, Kei continues to work, its body steaming. Yoshizawa can feel his consciousness fading from the cold. Saiaka reaches out, trying to help him up. The tofu yokai also struggles, her body seizing up. But her hand reaches not for help, but for her hat. Yoshizawa can't believe she's still worried about that. Talk about having your priorities straight. But he realizes he's about to die just the same. He tells the yokai he'll give her the hat before he dies. The tofu yokai desperately reaches for it. But Saiaka looks up, her body catching the pale sunlight. Her gelatinous form begins to glow. And Yoshizawa realizes her body is acting like a lens. He screams that the light is blinding him. A single focused beam hits him directly, and his clothes immediately burst into flames. He screams in pain, covered in both fire and tofu splatter. A truly dignified end. As Kei, the cleaning robot, makes a swift and sensible exit. Kei seems to scold Yoshizawa for interfering with its work. The robot stands tall, its vacuum hose pointed forward. It reverses the flow, creating a powerful blast of air. The ghost hunter is suddenly expelled from the machine, looking just as confused as everyone else. Yoshizawa stares, his mind struggling to keep up. He realizes the freezing cold has vanished and his body is warming up. Guess that's one way to solve a hypothermia problem. But now Kei is engulfed in a strange, dark flame. The energy seems to be consuming the robot's body, and the ghost hunter reemerges, looking far more sinister. The ghost hunter is free, looking at Yoshizawa with confusion. It then turns and floats away from the group, and zips off into the distance, leaving them all behind. Yoshizawa's mind replays the chaotic chain of events, and he realizes their combined failures somehow saved them all. He looks up as if sensing the eyes of the crowd. The monstrous spectators watch the bizarre display unfold, and the blindfolded organizer seems quite pleased with the show. He wonders what this pathetic group will do next. Suddenly, a smiling scarecrow appears before them. It offers them a place to stay if they're tired or hurt. A memory flashes of the scarecrow guiding others, always repeating the name of this place, Amamorei village. It remembers an old man speaking of monsters, and a flash of light that stole all hope. It recalls a town filled with strange, smiling faces, even a horse-headed guy, which is a new one. It remembers the voices of children by the river, and the scarecrow jolts as if lost in these memories. Back in the present, a heavy rain begins to fall. The scarecrow stands motionless, soaked by the downpour. The memories continue, showing two travelers in a downpour. They recall a grim scene in Amamorei village, a place that was once peaceful and quiet, always watched over by the smiling scarecrow. But that peace was shattered by a sudden, cold tragedy. Yet the scarecrow's smile never changed. A lone figure walks away from the devastation. The scarecrow repeats its welcome to Amamorei village, but a new voice cuts in, claiming to already know. A regal figure appears, declaring that he created this entire world. Well, that's one way to introduce yourself. The regal figure explains he's considered many options, but the scarecrow has played its part for centuries without question. He says its unwavering loyalty is what makes it so popular. The scarecrow can only offer a silent, confused smile. The regal figure's power flares around him as he makes his choice. He officially selects the scarecrow to represent its world, in the tournament to decide the weakest of all time. His voice booms with a single final command. Go and fight! And with a brutal backhand, he sends the scarecrow flying. So much for a gentle send-off. Its body rips apart, revealing a small dog-like creature inside. The creature ignites itself, a memory of a past battle. It recalls terrifying its opponent into submission. Its god watches from the stands, confused as the scarecrow is declared the winner. His confusion turns to a slow, dawning smile. It's actually winning. A fellow spectator mocks him for his champion's pathetic display. The god listens, his blank eyes betraying no emotion. He can only offer a nervous, awkward laugh in response. The flashback shows the aftermath of its victory in the arena. But after that single win, it failed to secure another. And so, without another fight, it was simply cast out of the tournament. Back in the arena, the announcer declares a new game has begun. The crowd roars, eager to see the pathetic contestants fight again. From gates all around the Colosseum, the thousands of other contestants are unleashed. The pig's god gives its champion a final word of encouragement. A disembodied brain issues its own commands from a jar. Yeah, this tournament has a very loose definition of god. A skeletal king sends its ghostly champion into the fray, and the scarecrow's master gives his final orders. He tells his champion to hunt down the 5 finalists, and with a confident smile sends it on its way. And back in the present, the scarecrow's smile remains fixed. It stands in the distance, a silent, unnerving observer. It seems to hear a sound from the woods, a faint rustling, and its head spins around with a sickening speed. It remembers watching Yoshizawa's encounter with the pig, and his desperate, fiery escape from the creature. It recalls his panicked confrontation with the tank. It's been watching their every pathetic moment of failure. And from its chest, a small, sharp blade emerges. Looks like playtime is over. Its master's voice echoes, "Hunt down the 5 finalists." The scarecrow charges forward with a terrifying, fixed smile. Its master's voice echoes in its mind, "Hunt down the 5, and eliminate them all." It bounds through the forest, closing the distance in an instant. The announcer declares that the scarecrow has finally caught up to its prey. Yoshizawa screams in panic, wondering where it's going, because it just bounces right past them without a second glance. Well, that was anticlimactic. The horned official congratulates the scarecrow's master on its performance. But a memory flashes, the scarecrow begging its master for something. And in the present, it simply points them in a new direction. A flashback shows the scarecrow gripping its staff tightly. It remembers being cast out by its god, and impaling itself in a brutal, accidental landing. It collapsed to the ground, seemingly out of the fight. But it slowly rises, that unnerving smile still in place. Its hands tremble as it grips the staff once more, and with a sudden burst of force, it snaps the weapon in two. The sound of the break echoes through the silent arena. It then approaches its fallen opponent on the ground and offers them a piece of the broken staff as a souvenir. Guess that's one way to win a match. The scarecrow's unnerving smile remains fixed in place. It begins to pull a length of rope from its own straw body and offers it to them with a chilling, silent grin. Its stitched mouth seems to widen in anticipation. Yoshizawa, now shirtless after his recent fiery incident, asks about the path, but the tofu yokai confirms the other way is completely impassable. He presses her, but she insists there's no other route. A grim realization begins to dawn on him. Their only way forward is a single log across a deep chasm. He knows they have to cross it, and carefully at that. The only problem is how to carry the unconscious mascot. Yoshizawa asks Kei for help, but the robot questions the request. Kei explains that carrying Gochin across the log is impossible for it. The tofu yokai also refuses, citing her duty to hold her plate. Just as Saiaka begins to absorb the mascot into her own body, Yoshizawa, looking completely drained, tells her it's fine. He decides to carry Gochin himself, asking Kei for support from behind. With a deep breath, he prepares to make the crossing, and so begins the slowest, most pathetic trek across the chasm. The tofu yokai informs him that this is, in fact, her top speed. Yoshizawa begs her to be quiet so he can focus on the crossing, but his attention is drawn to the figure waiting ahead. It's the scarecrow, its smile just as unnerving as before, which promptly slams a massive pole down, blocking their path. Yoshizawa's eyes widen as he sees what it's swinging. That's not a staff. It's a sharpened blade on a rope. They're trapped, with a fatal drop on either side. But a sudden shout of realization echoes from the stands. The scarecrow's master praises its brilliant ambush strategy. A flashback reveals its centuries of silent, unquestioning obedience. The tofu yokai stares, her expression frozen in shock. The master explains that the scarecrow is simple and honest, and that its simple honesty will lead it to victory. But the other gods in the stands are completely baffled. They ask if he even understands the point of this tournament. A competition where pathetic failure is the entire goal. The master's confidence shatters into pure, panicked dread. Guess he missed the memo on losing with style. He slumps in his seat, utterly humiliated by his mistake. Back on the bridge, the announcer calls out the shocking development. The finalists are trapped, with no way forward and no way back. The other gods can only stare, completely underwhelmed. The scarecrow's master is frozen in pure, unadulterated shock. The crowd's disappointment is palpable. He finally understands the colossal mistake he's just made. His brilliant strategy has just cost him everything. Meanwhile, Yoshizawa braces for the incoming attack. The scarecrow swings its weapon with a terrifying smile, leaving our boy completely paralyzed with fear. But its hand reaches out not to attack, but to offer them a way across the chasm. Yoshizawa can only stare, completely baffled by this gesture. The scarecrow has created a makeshift bridge with its weapon. The crowd watches on, their expressions a mix of shock and confusion. And the scarecrow's master is left in a state of catatonic horror. He's suddenly confronted by the tournament security detail. Looks like someone's getting a formal write-up. They inform him that his interference is a grave violation of the sacred rules, and that he's being cordially invited to have a little chat backstage. The master panics, trying to plead his case, but he's escorted away, still insisting he just wanted to liven things up. The other gods can only shake their heads at his utter incompetence. He screams in disbelief, questioning why anyone would try so hard to win. He laments that this was supposed to be a simple laugh for the gods, and throws a full-blown tantrum. Apparently, divine beings don't handle failure well. A memory flashes of a peaceful village, with people tending their crops. Children run happily through the quiet streets. A place where birds flew freely over the rooftops. A simple, idyllic world now lost to time. An ominous message declares that service to this dimension has ended. Back in the present, a new day begins to dawn. Yoshizawa looks up, feeling the sun's warmth on his skin at last. He turns to Saiaka, who seems to call out to him. She looks back, her form catching the bright morning sun. And Yoshizawa's face fills with a familiar sense of dread. The entire group scrambles as a beam of light shoots past them. Her body is once again acting as a powerful lens. He knows he has to solve this problem before the sun gets any higher. He pleads with the tofu yokai for her hat, but gets a firm, immediate no. With a heavy sigh, he continues his trek up the snowy slope, until he spots two flags planted at the very top of the ridge. They finally reach the summit, looking up at the strange markers. He wonders if the flags are some kind of landmark. The tofu yokai scoffs at the idea of a meaningless sign, but Kei the robot declares that it is, in fact, meaningless. It then rips one of the flags from the ground, calling it trash. Yoshizawa panics, trying to stop the robot's cleaning spree. But then he realizes the flag could be useful. He quickly wraps the cloth around Sayaka's head, draping it over her shoulders to block the sun's rays. She looks up at him, confused by the sudden wardrobe change. The tofu yokai looks on, still deeply invested in headwear politics. He snaps, yelling at the yokai for complaining when she won't help. Sayaka, meanwhile, seems to be missing the point of the conversation entirely. The tofu yokai walks on, assuming he has some profound reason for his request, a thought that leaves Yoshizawa completely and utterly flustered. Sayaka stands, having fashioned the flag into a makeshift dress. She adjusts the cloth, trying to get the fit just right, and strikes a pose, seemingly proud of her work. Fashion in a death game is a bold choice. But her first step ends in a clumsy, spectacular fall. She lands face first in the snow with a soft thud. Yoshizawa can only yell that she's wearing it all wrong. The tofu yokai accuses him of staring, a claim he vehemently denies. Sayaka looks over, sensing his utter embarrassment. So he fashions the other flag into a makeshift toga for himself. Sayaka looks down at her own outfit, then tugs on his as if comparing notes. He can only look on, confused by her actions. But she just beams, delighted by their matching look. A reaction that leaves both him and the yokai completely baffled. With the clothing crisis apparently solved, he declares it's time to move on, and the pathetic group continues their journey through the snow. A strange rumbling sound echoes across the snow. The ground begins to shake violently beneath their feet, and from the depths, two massive domes rise into the air. An entire ancient temple emerges from the frozen earth, watched over by a headless, imposing statue, a monument to a long-forgotten, broken power. The group can only stare out at this new, impossible landscape. Their journey has led them to yet another bizarre stage, and Yoshizawa takes a moment to assess his team's combat potential. It's not looking good, but his math reveals their combined power is slightly more than one person, a truly terrifying force to be reckoned with. Kei asks why he's suddenly acting so creepy. Yoshizawa just smiles, saying he thinks they're a good team, a sentiment that Kei does not seem to share. He looks out across the vast, empty plains as a strange, three-wheeled vehicle barrels toward them. It's another hunter, this one with a particularly angry-looking grill. Yoshizawa panics, realizing a car is far stronger than any of them. He insists there's no way they can possibly run from it. But then his mood shifts, declaring they can take it down together, an idea that leaves the rest of his team utterly baffled. He explains that while they can't outrun it, they can stop it if they just take out its tires. Kei asks how Yoshizawa smiles, ready to lay out his brilliant strategy. The plan is for Kei to hide and use its suction to stop the car. Kei immediately calls it impossible. It explains that its vacuum needs a seal to work properly. You can't just suck things from a distance. And even if it could attach itself, the car would just drag it along. So much for that brilliant plan. Yoshizawa's confidence evaporates as he calls the robot useless, a word that seems to strike a very sensitive nerve in Kei. The robot gets in his face, demanding to know what his plan is now. Yoshizawa panics and grabs Gachin, suggesting they use it as a weapon. The tofu yokai questions his plan to use the mascot as a projectile. He screams back that if she has a better idea, now's the time. With no plan, the group scatters in a panic. But the car swerves wildly, struggling to turn in the snow, a detail that doesn't escape Yoshizawa's notice. He realizes their pursuer is a clunker, unable to handle sharp turns. Looks like the hunters are on a budget. He stands his ground, realizing he can dodge it. He sidesteps the clumsy vehicle with ease, knowing that if he keeps this up, an opportunity will present itself, until the window shatters, revealing a car full of very angry-looking hunters. So much for a one-on-one fight. A weapon slices through the air, striking Yoshizawa's shoulder. He cries out, collapsing to the ground in agony. He realizes his mistake. It wasn't just one driver. He questions why he ever assumed they'd come one at a time. Sayaka looks on, her expression filled with alarm. She rushes to his side, grabbing his injured arm. She presses her body against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. He falls back, noticing the sun is directly overhead. The car barrels toward him, ready to finish the job, but his eyes are fixed on its black, spinning tire. A desperate idea forms in Yoshizawa's mind. He points, giving Sayaka a silent command. She looks down, understanding the risky plan, and she falls forward, positioning herself above him. Her face is a mask of pure concentration. Yoshizawa looks on, confused by the strange sensation. He looks up as the car barrels toward them. A brilliant flash of light erupts from Sayaka's body. The hunter shields its eyes, blinded by the sudden glare, and Yoshizawa realizes his pants are on fire again. Guess he should have seen that coming. The car swerves wildly out of control and crashes into the ground, sending the finalists scattering. Yoshizawa drifts back to consciousness once again. He finds himself in a dark, unfamiliar place. The ground beneath him is hard, like asphalt. A sudden, desperate hope fills his eyes. The hope that he's finally returned home. But he hasn't, not even close. He's surrounded by massive, crumbling architecture, trapped in yet another stage of this bizarre game. The set design budget is apparently unlimited. He questions his new surroundings, now inside a building. A splash of water snaps him back to consciousness. He looks up, realizing they fell through the ceiling. The entire temple was buried beneath the snow. He's stunned that he even survived the fall. Honestly, his luck is almost as impressive as his weakness. But his relief turns to panic as he calls for the others. He searches the ruins, calling out for Saiaka, and finds her collapsed on the stone floor. Her expression is a mask of pain and confusion. He calls out for Kei, his voice echoing in the darkness. But it's the tofu yokai who answers, looking a bit melted. He whips around, desperately calling out for Saiaka. The yokai is drenched and dazed, but otherwise intact. Guess tofu is surprisingly durable. He explains that they must have fallen from above. She looks around, realizing the others are missing. She suddenly springs into action, ready to search. Yoshizawa agrees they could be buried under the rubble, and so the two of them begin to frantically dig through the ruins. But their search turns up nothing, leaving Yoshizawa to fear the worst. The tofu yokai is surprised by his genuine concern for the others. Just then, Yoshizawa spots something familiar in the rubble. He pulls out her precious plate, miraculously intact. The yokai's eyes widen in pure, unadulterated shock. She snatches it from his hands with surprising speed. A strange, relieved smile spreads across her face. Yoshizawa can only stare, completely bewildered. She then places the plate on her head like a hat. Guess priorities are priorities, and he realizes she wasn't searching for their friends. She was just looking for her lost plate the entire time. He asks if she's serious, his voice filled with disbelief. The tofu yokai looks down, avoiding his gaze. She admits she was just looking for her tofu. Teamwork is clearly not her strong suit. Yoshizawa's face contorts with pure, unadulterated rage, and he finally snaps, grabbing her by the collar. He screams, demanding to know what she's even thinking. He asks if she has any concern for their missing friends. She mutters that Saiaka is probably fine anyway. Her nonchalance leaves him completely flustered. He accuses her of only caring about her precious tofu. He points a trembling finger at the yokai, his voice cracking with rage. He turns his anger on the unconscious Kei, then on the fallen mascot, and finally on Saiaka, blaming them all for their failure. The tofu yokai can only stare, completely baffled by his breakdown. And then he realizes he's crying, the frustration finally boiling over. The yokai looks on, completely unimpressed by his blubbering. Emotional support is clearly not in her job description. The sight of his own tears triggers a memory of the original Saiaka. He turns away, overwhelmed by a wave of shame and sorrow, and collapses to the ground, utterly and completely broken. The tofu yokai tries to explain herself, plate still firmly on her head. She tells a distraught Yoshizawa not to worry so much. She recalls the moment they were all swept away by the collapsing snow, and how they landed on the temple roof. Only she and Yoshizawa fell through the hole in the ceiling. The other three were carried away in a completely different direction. She says with a chilling smile that it's obvious they wouldn't be inside. Yoshizawa realizes with dawning horror that the others are probably outside. He explodes, demanding to know why she kept that information to herself, because if she'd told him, he wouldn't have helped her find her tofu. Priorities. He leans back, his mind struggling to process her logic. He can't comprehend her complete lack of concern for anyone but herself. But a sudden sound cuts through his anger. He quickly signals for silence, peering around a pillar. A slow smile spreads across his face as he realizes something. The sound grows louder, a familiar rumbling, and he confirms that the collapse was massive, which means their pursuer must have fallen too. His brief moment of relief shatters instantly, because the hunter's car is right here with them. Looks like their luck just ran out again, and the hunters inside are ready for another round. Yoshizawa and the yokai are completely cornered. He makes a desperate break for it down the narrow hall. He screams at her, asking why she didn't mention this. She calmly explains that her tofu was the priority. Of course it was. He realizes her selfishness has just led the hunters right to them. The tofu yokai simply confirms that yes, they are here to kill them. The car barrels down the corridor, leaving them no room to escape. Yoshizawa can only stand there, defeated by his own terrible luck. He dives for cover as the car smashes into the ruins behind him. The car wedges itself into the narrow passage. But Yoshizawa realizes the tight space gives them an advantage. The tofu yokai stares back in alarm. A sudden wild look crosses her face. The car struggles to reverse out of the corridor. and she spots a single piece of her lost tofu, sitting right on the back of the car. Her priorities are, as always, impeccable. She suddenly sprints past him, ignoring the danger. He screams at her, trying to understand her actions. He grabs her, realizing she's trying to rescue her food. He grabs her, trying to pull her to safety, but a massive pillar comes crashing down from above. The pillar smashes into the ground, blocking the hunter's path. The shockwave sends them both flying, and the car is thrown completely off balance by the collapse. But in the chaos, the tofu yokai's precious cargo is lost. A moment of silence for the fallen tofu. Yoshizawa screams at her to forget the plate and save herself. She can only stare at her empty dish in utter disbelief. He dangles from a ledge, holding her with one hand. His grip tightens, refusing to let go despite the strain. He screams at her to let go of the plate and save her life, but she just looks up with a strange, unsettling calm and asks if he knows the story of the tofu kozo. Not the best time for folklore, lady. Yoshizawa is completely lost, insisting this isn't the time. She explains the legend of a small, childlike spirit whose story has been passed down through the ages. A yokai with no purpose who neither helps nor harms. He cuts her off, desperately pleading for her to take his hand. She simply calls herself a truly empty, meaningless creature. And Yoshizawa finally snaps, screaming that they're all just as pathetic as she is. She explains that without her duty, she is nothing. That her entire existence would be utterly meaningless. Yoshizawa can't believe she's so hung up on her purpose. He flashes back to his old life, a man with no real identity. He's lost his suit, his name, everything that defined him. But he still clings to life, terrified of a true end. He grabs her, screaming that he's envious of her simple existence. The tofu yokai can only stare, completely taken aback. She can't even process his sudden, desperate outburst. He tells her she's lucky to have a purpose, no matter how strange. He screams that he hasn't known what to do for years. But the tofu yokai just smiles, saying she's envious of him. A response that leaves Yoshizawa completely speechless. She suddenly lets go of his hand, her fingers slipping from his desperate grasp, and uses his arm to launch herself back onto the ledge. Guess that's one way to get a leg up. She lands safely on the stone floor above. Down below, the hunters struggle to free their trapped vehicle. Their faces fill with alarm as they look up, because the tofu yokai is now pointing her plate at them like a weapon. She says that she's envious of him. Down below, the hunters are still stuck behind the rock. One of them emerges, ready to finish the job, but their path is completely blocked. The tofu yokai says she knows exactly who she is, and with a sudden flash, she uses her plate to reflect the light from above. The focused beam hits the car with incredible force, sending the hunters flying from the impact. She stands there completely unfazed by her handiwork. Turns out ceramic is surprisingly effective. She declares that this is her style, her true purpose. But one of the hunters rises, ready to retaliate. He swings his weapon, launching a projectile of his own, using her own fallen tofu against her. A truly villainous move. The hunter's face contorts with a strange expression. As he's immediately taken down by his own tofu-based attack, the tofu yokai catches the rebound with a smug smile. She vows that as long as she exists, her tofu is safe. Yoshizawa can only watch from the ground, utterly speechless. The tofu yokai stands ready, having found her battle cry. She stands her ground as Yoshizawa scrambles back. Her smile is confident, her purpose finally clear. He can only stare, completely stunned by her transformation. She tells him she understands his envy of her simple existence. Yoshizawa can only offer a weak, stammering reply. And just like that, they're all back in the main arena. The defeated hunters are escorted from their wrecked vehicle. The announcer praises their spectacular failure for the crowd. The blindfolded man asks how it feels to be a top contender for last place. And the monstrous crowd roars, demanding more pathetic entertainment. One of the defeated hunters lets out a wild, triumphant laugh. Back in the control room, the two organizers watch the screens. The horned official declares this the most exciting tournament in history, but the blindfolded man reflects on their dwindling power and excuses himself, leaving his colleague in charge for a moment. Meanwhile, the defeated hunter slams its fist against a wall. It mutters a curse against the gods who orchestrated this game and storms off down a long, empty corridor, watched from the shadows by the smiling, blindfolded man, as Yoshizawa and the tofu yokai continue their trek through the ruins. The tofu yokai begins a strange lecture about the importance of what's inside. Yoshizawa, completely lost, asks how one even develops that. She uses her tofu as an example, listing its various components. She explains that the container is what gives the contents their shape. Without a form, she says, the substance inside is meaningless. He stares at the jiggling block of tofu. the metaphor slowly sinking in. His mind flashes back to the slime, a formless, trembling creature, and he realizes what she's getting at, whispering Sayaka's name. At first, Saiaka was just a blob, but she gained a human form. Learning to walk, to feel, and to express herself, she explains that Saiaka is no longer just a slime, but has become a person he's been treating. Like a tool, a shield, a disposable asset. His mind flashes back to the original Saiaka, and the moment he failed to protect her, the tofu yokai watches his breakdown with an unsettling calm. Guess she's seen worse. Their moment of self-reflection is cut short by the glint of a massive blade. A new hunter appears, flanked by her own strange companions, and she swings her weapon without a moment's hesitation. The new hunter leaps forward, her expression a mix of shock and resolve. Her eyes are wide with a sudden dawning panic. Yoshizawa and the tofu yokai continue their walk, completely unaware. He looks back, calling out Sayaka's name in confusion. The hunter's strange companions warn her to attack. Yoshizawa turns, staff at the ready as the yokai calls out to him. He swings his weapon, realizing too late the ceiling is too high for his plan. A powerful strike slams into the ground right beside them. One of the hunter's companions asks if Yoshizawa is all right. Well, this is a new level of confusing. Yoshizawa can only stare, his mind struggling to process the friendly fire. And one of those companions is a very familiar, very angry pig. Yoshizawa realizes he's been sent back to this fight. He spits out his cigarette with a frantic apology, just as a cloud of dust erupts around him. A powerful blow slams into the ground. The impact shatters his cigarette, leaving him stunned. A new hunter appears, a young man with a staff, telling them to get back. The pig screams in frustration, asking why it was sent here to be crushed. Its expression hardens, daring them to try that again. The young hunter calmly assesses the reach of his own weapon. The pig explains it saw the scarecrow's weapon and decided to make a copy for itself. The young hunter is stunned by his teammate's sudden attack. The entire group scrambles for cover down the narrow hallway, but they're quickly cornered by this new chaotic team of hunters, one of whom is a crying mascot with a bloody nose, and another is a robot panicking about the mess. This team's got issues. The pig swings its weapon wildly, ready for a fight. Yoshizawa realizes that he's the only one who can protect Sayaka and the others. His mind races, breaking down the pig's attack pattern and finding a critical weakness in its design. He knows that to stop the pig, he'll have to strike first. But if he attacks, he becomes a killer. And if he doesn't, they won't be saved. He steels himself, realizing that without the resolve to face death, he can't protect anyone. But a gentle tug on his makeshift toga stops him cold. He turns, surprised by the interruption, and sees Sayaka looking at him with deep concern. He knows he has to do this for her sake. But her expression is filled with a silent plea, a plea that reminds him of her vulnerability in this brutal world. And his newfound resolve begins to waver. He realizes he's making the wrong choice yet again. He slumps, his hard-won resolve completely gone. But then he notices a dark, viscous puddle on the floor. His eyes widen as a shoe steps right into the mess. The black substance clings to the shoe like tar. And Kei the robot appears, looking down at the goo. It seems confused by the sudden mess on the floor. So naturally, it begins to vacuum it all up. The powerful suction pulls the strange substance into its nozzle, and Yoshizawa watches in horror as Gochin the mascot is pulled apart by the force. His resolve hardens, a grim determination in his eyes. The pig charges forward, screaming that this is the end. Yoshizawa rushes to meet it, staff at the ready. But instead of attacking, he throws his weapon aside. He sprints past his allies, a new desperate plan taking shape. Kei can only watch, completely baffled by the sudden change. Yoshizawa's eyes land on the dissolving mascot. He grabs Goken's face with both hands. He offers a quick apology for what he's about to do, and uses the poor creature as a high-pressure goo cannon. Gross, but effective. The goo cannon fires a stream of black liquid high into the air. It splatters against the stone ramparts of the temple. He spots the tofu yokai in a window high above, and asks her to throw down her precious tofu, a truly desperate gambit. She understands immediately, tossing a block down to him. He catches it, his strange plan coming together. The hunters can only watch as Sayaka and Kei are told to grab on. They all cling to the mascot, forming a bizarre human chain. As the tofu yokai prepares to throw her plate down like a weapon, a hand holds a strange, translucent shard. Yoshizawa holds the tofu, ready to execute his insane plan. High above, the tofu yokai watches from the window. She understands her role in this chaotic escape. With her plate held tight, she prepares to make a leap of faith. A look of grim resolve crosses her face. She jumps from the ledge, aiming for her friends below. She soars through the air, a truly bizarre sight. and grabs onto Yoshizawa, completing their human chain. The entire group swings away from the hunters, using a dissolving mascot as a grappling hook. You really can't make this stuff up. The pig hunter can only stare, completely stunned by their escape. It watches as the group swings away, soaring high above the temple ruins. A truly magnificent, if utterly insane, getaway. But their gooey grappling hook suddenly snaps. Well, that was a short-lived victory, and the entire group plummets back toward the ground. They slam hard into the side of a massive stone tower, a tower that seems to stretch endlessly into the sky. Yoshizawa looks down, realizing just how far they have to fall. But Sayaka's expression is one of calm resolve. Her hand slams onto the stone ledge, gripping it tight, and with a surge of strength, Sayaka pulls them all upward. Her arm stretches like a rope, defying all logic, hauling the entire pathetic group to safety. A single dress shoe lands on solid ground, and just like that, they're all standing together again. Yoshizawa cries out in pure, unadulterated relief. Even Kei can't believe their insane plan actually worked. Yoshizawa turns to the robot, thanking it for its cleaning. He explains he saw the mascot's goo stretching inside its vacuum, giving him the idea. He explains the goo reminded him of hair clogging his vacuum cleaner at home. Kei adds that it knew the substance would stretch and then harden. It even praises Yoshizawa as the man who was covered in more of it than anyone. What an honor. Gachin, now awake, explains the goo was just a defense mechanism. The mascot seems a bit embarrassed by the whole messy affair. The tofu yokai chimes in, mentioning her own part in their escape. And Gochin suddenly transforms into a young girl, thanking Sayaka for the save. Yoshizawa looks at her, offering a quiet word of thanks, before bowing deeply, apologizing for using her as a weapon. The girl reaches out, her hand still partially goo, taken aback by his sincerity. Kei warns that more hunters could be on their way, but Yoshizawa stops, realizing they've found an exit. A path leading to the base of a massive, headless statue. He and Sayaka look up, a way to the surface finally clear. But a familiar figure is waiting for them on the statue's shoulder. The blindfolded man praises Yoshizawa for his impressive display. So naturally, Yoshizawa immediately turns and runs for his life. The organizer watches him go, his expression unreadable. He says that this is fine because he was waiting for someone just like him. As the pathetic group runs from a fate chosen by the gods, Kei explains that those who get involved also begin to change, a fact that leaves Gochin and the tofu yokai completely bewildered. Even Sayaka and the other hunters seem to be affected by this chaos. The pig declares that this is not what its god intended, a memory of a world destroyed by the whims of a divine being. Yoshizawa stands before the headless statue, a monument to a fallen god, a flashback to a robed figure, vowing to take the place of the old gods. And in the present, the pathetic group rests in a vast, empty desert. Looks like they've found a new, equally terrible biome. But Yoshizawa suddenly stands, a new resolve on his face. He turns to Sayaka with a bright, hopeful smile. Sayaka looks back at him, confused by his sudden change in mood. He tears a piece from his own makeshift toga and tells her that now they're truly matching,